Board of Commissioners meeting for Tuesday, April 30th, 2024. Please note that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is located in the north wall of the Legislative Chamber, as well as an automatic external defibrillator on the back wall. Please stand for the pledge. We'll start with our Douglas County Board of Equalization meeting. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Borgeson. Commissioner Boyle. Commissioner Kavanaugh. Commissioner Friend. Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Rogers. Mr. Chair.
Here. First item of business are items A and B, A being the approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024, and B, a call for a meeting and set Tuesday, April 7th, 2024 as date for hearing on certified assessment corrections reflecting the addition of omitted property to the tax rolls or increased value on property. What is the will of the board?
Move for approval.
Motion by Morgan, second by Rogers. Please vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Next item of business are resolutions, resolutions C and D. We also do not have a need for executive session, so a motion to approve can include adjournments.
Second.
Motion by Rogers, second by Morgan. Was anybody here to speak on resolution C or D? If not, we'll vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. That concludes our Board of Equalization meeting. We'll now jump into Board of Commissioners. Roll call.
Commissioner Borgeson. Commissioner Boyle. Commissioner Kavanaugh. Commissioner Friend. Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Rogers. Mr. Chair.
Here. First item of business are items 1A and B. A being the approval of minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024, and B, approval of claims submitted for payment process through Tuesday, April 30th, 2024. What is the will of the board?
Move for approval.
Motion by Morgan, second by Rogers. Please vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Next, we have our consent agenda, items A through F. Do I have a motion and second? Motion by Rogers, second by Friend. Is there any discussion on any items A through F? Seeing none, we'll vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. We'll jump to agenda item 3, recognitions and proclamations. We have one proclamation today, and I'll toss it to Commissioner Borgeson for this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we actually have a special presentation for this resolution, and Karen's going to be calling it up here.
Whereas mental health is essential to everyone's overall health and well-being, as all Americans face challenges in life that can impact their mental health. And
whereas there are practical tools that all people can use to improve their mental health and increase resiliency. And
whereas mental health conditions are real and prevalent throughout our nation. However, with effective treatment, individuals with mental health conditions can recover and lead full, productive lives. And
whereas Douglas County has prioritized aiding those in our community with mental illness through the services provided by our Community Mental Health Center. And
whereas CMHC provides many behavioral health services, including inpatient services, outpatient programs, and social detoxification substance abuse services. Over 3,200 people received care or services from CMHC in 2023. And
whereas CMHC's services collaborate closely with Douglas County Corrections, facilitating programs such as mental health diversion, emergency community support, chemical dependency evaluations, intensive outpatient care, and educational classes start now. And
whereas each business, school, government agency, healthcare provider, organization, and citizen share the burden of mental health challenges and have a responsibility to promote mental wellness and support prevention strategies and treatment efforts in our community and workplaces.
Now therefore, be it resolved by this Board of County Commissioners, Douglas County, Nebraska, that this board does hereby proclaim May to be Mental Health Awareness Month and encourages every resident to commit to increasing the awareness and understanding of mental health in our community. To learn the steps individuals can take to strengthen their mental health and to recognize the general need to support appropriate and accessible services for all people with mental health conditions.
Motion to approve?
Motion by Borgerson, second by Friend.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I just want to thank Leah and Jake and the staff at the Community Mental Health Center for doing this. I actually got the idea from our Eastern Nebraska Office on Aging that showed me one, a talking resolution basically is what they're called, and it's just so cool. I mean, listening to them do the whereases and the importance of mental health that this board has made actually gave me goosebumps as I was watching it. And so anyway, they all did a great job, and so thank you very much for doing that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that as well, and to our staff at the Community Mental Health Center and all our staff that work in mental health in general. We're thankful for you. So we'll go ahead and vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right, thank you very much. We'll jump to presentations on the agenda. We have two presentations today. The first one is item A, 108th unicameral second legislative session presentation and report by the county's lobbyists, Sean Kelly and Julia Plucker, and also presentation and reports by John Cannon of the Nebraska Association of Counties.
Good morning,
Sean?
Chairman Garcia, Board of Commissioners. Sean Kelly, 2804 South 87th Ave. Appearing this morning to provide the annual legislative update now that the 108th Legislature's second session has adjourned. They officially adjourned on April 18th at 6:35 p.m. Sine die, and it may not be the last time they convene in 2024, but we will see. So I feel like a lot of the commissioners and staff lived through this session with me. It was a very active session, to say the least. In the biennium, there were 1,417 bills and resolutions introduced. In 2024, there was 597 bills and resolutions introduced. So just that sheer volume gives you an idea of all the ideas and concepts that were out there to be discussed. So in 2024, 189 bills were passed, and in those bills, another 138 legislative bills were comprised in those. So a total of 327 bills passed, excluding the A bills that accompanied some of those bills. In total, 103 priority bills were designated, and 83 of those 103 passed. So pretty high percentage of bills were being passed this year, and in contrast to the 2023 legislative session. From this board, in 2024, you passed 17 resolutions in support of legislation. 8 of those were in support, 8 in opposition, and 1 of those resolutions was just to monitor a piece of legislation. So of those 16, 8 were in support and 8 were in opposition. Of the 8 in support, 3 of those bills were passed. That was LB 869, which expanded the definition for county Veteran Services Committee services to include those that also served not during wartime. LB 938, which expands the County Purchasing Act, expands those thresholds, stair steps them up over the years. And then LB 1087, which was adopt the Hospital Quality Assurance and Access Assessment Act. That bill was brought forward by the Nebraska Hospital Association, but will have a positive impact to the Douglas County Health Center, upwards of over $2 million as an estimate on an annual basis. One bill that this board had us introduce in 2023 was LB 317 that would allow for virtual inspections for the county assessor's office. I know Commissioner Morgan has talked about that for several years, so we're happy and pleased that that bill, LB 317, passed in the 2024 session. Of the 8 bills that this board opposed, only one of those bills in opposition did pass. That was LB 1413, which was a budget bill that transferred funds for behavioral health from DHHS to the state's general fund. So the board was in opposition of that, but that bill ultimately passed. The other 7 bills that this board opposed, none of those bills were signed into law. So really the bulk of our time this session really centered around Governor Pillen's tax proposal and that impact to Douglas County. At its starting point, it certainly was a negative impact to Douglas County. And the final product, it was certainly more palatable, still not quite certain as to the impacts. It would have just been able to tell if it were to pass and be in effect. But ultimately, that bill did not pass and could be the subject of a special session. We will see. The second one that was really time-consuming was the inheritance tax, the proposal to phase out the inheritance tax. That bill ultimately failed, but then there was a second attempt to try to replace revenue for loss of revenue of the inheritance tax to counties. And that bill advanced all the way to final reading and then did not go through on final reading. So in addition to all the legislation, there's 120 interim studies introduced. I've highlighted several in your report, but very familiar topics. There's 2 on inheritance tax and replacement revenue. There's also one on unfunded mandates, additional items on behavioral health. So that is the 40,000-foot view of the legislative session. I'm happy to take any questions. Again, I'd like to thank all the staff and commissioners for your time and support throughout the session because it was certainly needed this year. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Sean. And if the board's okay, we'll do both presentations on the legislature from NACO and Sean, and then we'll get into the discussion of the legislative session. Thank you, Sean. I know how busy you were this session, so much appreciated. John, if you want to come up.
Good morning, Chairman Garcia, members of the board. My name is John Cannon. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Association of County Officials, also known as NACO. Here to visit with you all about mostly the legislative session that we just passed, but also kind of give you the NACO update. NACO is a fairly busy organization. As you know, we're an advocacy organization, an educational organization, and so there's a number of things that we do throughout the year that aren't necessarily related to legislation. Like I said, I'll get to the legislation near the end. Just a few things I want to address with you all. Resources that we have available at NACO for counties across the state. One of the big ones we have coming up is June 12th of this year is the county county budget workshop. That'll be in Kearney. Starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. The reason is because it'll flow right into the county board workshop. State Auditor's Office will be there. The Property Assessment Division will be there. Governor Pillen is going to be the keynote. And as Sean very ably explained in his report, with everything related to budgets and property taxes, the governor's going to have a few things to say in all likelihood. And so that was one of the reasons that we wanted the governor there to deliver the message as far as what he was seeing from a budgeting perspective. Wanted to give him that opportunity to provide messaging to all of our counties that are going to be in attendance, and not just counties, but also the people that prepare budgets, because we think it's vitally important they're there as well to hear the message from the auditor, the Property Assessment Division, and the governor. We'll roll right into our county board workshop. County board workshop is June 12 and 13. We'll present the outstanding county board member of the year. The applications are now open. Deadline is this Friday, May 3rd, so There's 7 of you here. You can nominate each other if you so desire. That would be great. One other thing I do want to mention as it pertains to legislation in particular is every year we have a legislative conference for NACO. The NACO board meets. We have a number of presentations from a number of different constituent groups. And so the assessors, the clerks, the treasurers, the sheriffs, the attorneys, highway supers, et cetera. We have individual county board members that will present their legislative priorities for NACO to adopt as a priority for the upcoming year. That will be on October 11th. That will be at the grand opening for the building in Ogallala that we're going to be that we're constructing right now. And so certainly hope to see all of you there. If it can't be all of you, we hope that at least a few of you can make it. Just a couple other items regarding what's going on at NACO. We've hired a benefits specialist, Greg Mooney. He'll be officing out of that Ogallala office. We've got a number of people that we're already going to be staffing there. We've filled the office suites for that office. The Attorney General is one of our tenants, Zell Human Resources, who we've partnered with on a number of different items, and NextEra Energy, which is a pipeline company. They'll be tenants of ours at the Ogallala office. April's County Government Month, as you know, and today's the last day of April, so probably won't spend a lot of time discussing that. Cybersecurity is a big deal. We keep getting notices from CISA and Homeland Security about all the threats that are out there. I hope hopefully your vendor has you guys adequately prepared. Sign up for our weekly newsletters. And then the National Association of Counties has a lot of resources for you for SLFRF, which is essentially ARPA funds, and LATCF, which is Local Access Trial Consistency Fund, PILT, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Douglas County, as you all know, has received an awful lot of money from the federal government in the last several years, and making sure that we spend that properly, in ways that are going to be impactful for the community is something that we're very invested in. So one last item before we get to legislation is next week is going to be a meeting of the Western Interstate Region of the National Association of Counties. WIR is actually older than NACO, and it's an organization of states that represent the interests of mostly folks that are out west. So there's a lot of land management issues. There's going to be a lot of stuff involving wildfire, PILT payments, and those sorts of things. I would ask you to ask your treasurer and or your clerk as to how much money in PILT, payments in lieu of tax, that Douglas County receives. You might be surprised. It's a number that's going to be fairly substantial. And that is, the federal government, obviously, we can't tax them because you can't tax the, our federal system of government, you can't tax the federal government. But what they do is because they recognize the fact that that takes land off the tax rolls, they make a payment in lieu of tax. And so you can't put a lien against it, but you're still able to receive tax payments. And so it's kind of a big deal. WIR is at the forefront of lobbying for that, advocating for that in Washington, D.C. And so we've been generally supportive of their efforts, and we just want to kind of join in. And so Marianne had a very nice endorsement for us that we put in our literature. And so we're hopeful, we're excited. Minnesota kind of jumped the line a couple years ago by becoming members. So there's a number of people in WIR that are saying, well, hold on a sec, this isn't preserving the Western voice necessarily, so we'll have our work cut out for us. But as far as legislation is concerned, there's not much I can say better than Sean Kelly had. It was a heck of a session. Obviously, the governor had a lot riding on the whole property tax structure. As you know, last year he had convened a valuation reform working group. There was a number of folks at the table. NACO was invited, a number of state senators, the Realtors Association, the League of Municipalities. And for what it's worth, and the reason the governor convened it is because they passed fairly historic property tax reform for the schools, poured a whole bunch of money into special education, a whole bunch of money into schools, under the assumption that that was going to essentially buy down the levy. A number of school districts, like 78% of them, they exceeded the soft cap that they had. And so the governor said, well, we're going to show them, we'll put caps on counties and cities, and we'll give more money to the schools. And so that, certainly we've learned the lesson, but that was the purpose of this valuation reform working group. And so at first he wanted to talk about valuations, how they affect the property tax issue. And through a lot of discussion, a number of people said, hey, look, all the valuations do is they tell you who's going to pay their fair share, what my fair share is in relation to everybody else. They're a function, but they're not the driver of the property tax. And so everyone went around the table, and Farm Bureau, and as you know, this governor is the first governor in 100 years to come from the agricultural industry. Farm Bureau said, we want our valuations to be as high as possible because that's what we depend on for our loans. And the governor at the very end of the conversation, that first conversation, said, well, it's not valuations that's the problem, it's property taxes. And so we're going to look at caps. And at that point we said, well, we don't like those. And he said, well, I'm proposing a 0% cap. And then actually I want you guys to start reducing your property tax ask. And we said, that's really not going to work very well, Governor, because there's a number of responsibilities that you put on us that we have to do. And if we don't do them, then people tend to get voted out of office. He said, well, you should be more concerned about doing the right thing than whether or not you win re-election. And we said, guess what? When our people get voted out of office, they're going to be replaced by people that are going to do what you don't want them to do. So, we got to work on that. So there was a lot of conversation in that as part of that valuation reform working group about unfunded mandates. Not a lot of there was more heat than light that came out of that. Nothing was introduced this session, but the governor has pledged that he's going to work on unfunded mandates. We'll see what happens with that. I don't have any reason to distrust him. He's certainly been straightforward with us. But that's one of the avenues that we're going to be looking at going into the future. But as you all know, essentially what got cobbled together was a tax plan for a cap. The governor, like I said, he started off at 0% cap with 0 exceptions. NACO and the league, we put together a proposal that would recognize some sort of a cap. Not too dissimilar from a lid that we already have. It's called the lid on restricted funds. I won't get into the gory details, but essentially what that is, it's a 2.5% lid on your total request for all your revenue streams from one year to the next. You can go up to 3.5% on a supermajority vote of the governing board, which would be the county board. And so what we had looked at was replacing the lid on restricted funds with the 3% cap. We kind of split the difference between 2.5% and 3% with certain necessary exceptions. And so we were looking at bonded indebtedness was a big one. The governor hated that, but he exceeded. We were looking at interlocal agreements. The governor really hated that, and he did not exceed, but we did get interlocal agreements for public safety put in. We had a few other things in there as well that we said these are must-haves in order for us to be able to operate under a cap. And so that was the presentation that we had made. The NACO board had voted on it before we made this proposal to the governor. And they picked the parts that they liked, they took out the parts that they didn't like, and then what we got was LB 388. And so because that was not what we had wanted, we took a position of opposition, but general supportiveness at NACO, general supportiveness of the governor's tax plan. In particular, one of the features that we thought was a necessary prerequisite for doing anything with property taxes is the way that we pay for property taxes at the state level. So as you all know, we have a property tax credit that appears on the property tax statement. We have a refundable income tax credit that people are eligible to apply for through their income tax return. And these are all things that are on the back end of the property tax process, right? It doesn't actually buy down a levy. And so what we had said is if you buy down the levy, you take the $1.3 billion that you got out there, instead of $5.3 billion being levied last year, it would be more like $4 billion being levied. And and to the extent that they care about these sorts of things, our ranking with people like the National Tax Foundation would go down, because what they look at from our ranking from a tax perspective is how much in taxes do you levy, not what are the net property taxes collected. And so there's a difference, because again, $5.3 billion is what was levied. It was about $4 billion is what was actually the net collected from, or the net paid by our citizens. And so our suggestion had been, if you front load these things so that people are getting this on the front end, it buys down the levy. If you have a cap, at 3% against $4 billion grows at about $120 million, whereas 3% against $5 billion grows at $150 million a year. So there was two kind of distinguishing features about that. And again, that wasn't adopted by this governor in LB 388. There was a separate mechanism that was similar to that was in a different bill. That bill hasn't really gone anywhere either. And so that was one of the big fights that we had originally, was working on LB 388. We still wanted to negotiate with the governor in good faith. We probably still will, assuming that there's going to be a special session. We will see. There have been a number of senators that have said, I'm not showing up for special sessions. You run into the problem as to whether or not they have a quorum. So that'll be exciting. So read the papers and stay tuned. Obviously, as Sean had mentioned, the other fight was with the inheritance tax. I want to thank all of you for the fact that I know that individually a number of you had written. Some of you had come and testified. Commissioner Friend, you testified neutral, but I'll tell you what, your testimony was extremely compelling. Basically saying, every single thing that we spend our money on, there is a statutory reference to why we have to do that. And after that, there were a number of senators that are ordinarily fairly hostile to us when it comes to the inheritance tax, they said, okay, what sorts of things can we get rid of so that counties don't have to spend as much money? So Commissioner Friend, kudos to you for that. But also for all of you that either emailed, texted, carrier pigeoned, whatever, however you communicated with our state legislature. It was very, very effective. You started to see very, very quickly that the tide really began to turn. It's very, very difficult to get rid of a $100 million revenue stream for counties. I talked to the governor's policy research director, and I said, you know, I'll tell you what, I'll be happy to trade you this revenue stream. You just give us motor vehicle sales tax collections, and you can have the inheritance tax. If you want to get rid of it, then go right ahead. And he almost went there, and he said, well, how much were motor vehicle sales tax collections last year? I said, it was $372 million. He said, oh, no, we can't do that. We can't afford it. And I said, you see the problem then, right? So that was one of the big issues, but you really did see that worm turn in the legislative chamber where they had to start looking for replacement revenue. As Sean had said, they started looking at replacement revenue in earnest in the waning days of the session with LB 1363. They couldn't get there. A lot of people weren't really willing to vote for a tax increase, for a tax decrease on the other side. That was one of the themes that you heard. But one thing I do want to tell all of you is that they are not going to stop. The inheritance tax has been under assault for a long, long time. It will continue to be so. Senator Clements, who's, by the way, I'm moving to East Lincoln. He's going to be my senator. I'll have to have a conversation with him as a constituent. But Senator Clements has got 2 years left, and he's said that is his number one priority is the elimination of the inheritance tax. This issue is going to be in front of us for a long time to come. For those of you who attended the NACO conference in December of 2022, will remember that the governor stood up and said, who here is in favor of keeping the inheritance tax? And he was shocked when every hand went up. But I think we all know where this governor comes from. And so the deck is a little bit stacked against us. So for that purpose, and because of that, and with the approval of the NACO board, we are going to start inviting senators and a number of other stakeholders, our friends at the Platt Institute, our friends at Open Sky, a few other stakeholders perhaps. We're going to invite them for a series of meetings and a workshop to essentially look at, if you eliminate the inheritance tax, how do you replace revenue in a sustainable way? And the reason I mentioned a sustainable way is because Senator Clements had come to me and said, well, we'll just cut you a check for the replacement revenue. And I said, we have zero interest in that. And the reason is because that check that they write us this year can be zeroed out next year. And so we want something that we're collecting at the local level and that's sustainable and shows that it's going to grow. One of the reasons that we like the doc stamp is that if you look at the 10-year trend in Douglas County and across the state, doc stamps have grown essentially along with the economy. And so that seems to be a good proxy for what we're talking about there. But the other message I do want to bring is on the inheritance tax in particular, but in legislation in general, is that we've got to have a good relationship with our state senators. And so I know that in the past, I didn't this time because I've been on the road a lot the last few days. I generally try to invite a few senators to come to a Douglas County board meeting if I'm going to show up here, and other board meetings across the state. Some of them show up, some of them do not. But more than that, you've got a number of candidates. As you all know, this is an election year. There are a number of candidates that are running for office that are very, very interested in some of those senator seats that are term limited. Please invite them here to the Douglas County board meeting. Let them understand what you go through. Let them hear about the issues that you have to deal with. That will make more of a difference than you know. And one, it really solidifies that relationship. It starts to build that relationship that we have with our state senators going into any session that we might have in the future. But two, it provides a very basic understanding of how this stuff works. I will tell you that in this last legislature, we had 4 former county board members that were in the legislature. 2 of them I'm not sure I would claim. I'll let you guess which ones those are. We also had 3 former county employees, Senator George Dungan, Senator John Kavanaugh, and Senator Carolyn Bosson. They were all either assistant public defenders or assistant county attorneys. And their understanding isn't quite as global as it is at the board level. And so there's really that necessity for having people that understand how county government works from the 30,000-foot view before they get in and they start passing laws that affect all of us. One thing from a statistical standpoint that I'll share with you is that we track 1/3 of all the bills that are introduced by the legislature, because 1/3 of all the bills introduced by the legislature, and it happens like clockwork every year, 1/3 of those bills are going to affect county government in one way, shape, or form. So it's absolutely vital that we have those relationships. We start building those relationships before they even take office. And so again, I'll implore all of you, if there's a meeting coming up, if there's a particular issue that you think someone needs to hear about, please invite the people that are running for office. Please invite the people that are currently in office. and let them start understanding how this whole thing works. Just a couple other bills I do want to mention. LB 43 was a bill that has to do with the Open Meetings Act as well as public records requests. There is a portion of LB 43 that took effect immediately after the legislature adjourned. And so to the extent that you've got a copy of the Open Meetings Act, it needs to be the most current copy of that, and I'll just mention that. I'm sure Dan's taking care of that, so I just want to mention that because I say that to everybody. LB 938 has made some revisions to the County Purchasing Act, and so it increased the thresholds. Starting on January 1st of 2025, the threshold will be $70,000 before you have to put something out to bid for a formal bid. So we think that's interesting, a little bit of a win. And then the last thing I do want to mention, since Sean mentioned there's potential for special session to come up, we need to be, as counties, we need to be very, very cognizant of when that special session will begin, because some counties, and I think Douglas County, have already started budgeting. And one of the features that they really want to include is this front-loading mechanism, which you would have to account for in your budgets as a budgeted receipt. And so obviously if they pass something in August and you've already passed your budget, that ain't gonna work so hot. So we need to be cognizant of the timing of a special session. Talk to your state senators. To the extent that you have a relationship with the governor, talk to the governor as well. That's all I have. I've run way over time. I apologize for that, but I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Sean, as well. Where did he go? Probably back there. Oh, there he is. So at this point, if board members or public have questions or comments on the legislative session, or for John or Sean, we'll go ahead and get into that discussion. We're going to start with Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you, and thanks for this. Sean, if you could come up for a second, I wanted to say kudos to you and your associate Julia Plucker on successfully, pretty much, defending our interests. And sometimes defense is way more important than offense. This session was challenging, I know. The first question I have is to the effect on Douglas County of a couple of these measures. The LB 1087, Adopt the Hospital Quality Assurance and Access Assessment Act. What's the effect on Douglas County of that measure?
So it's all estimates right now, but the.
Could you, yeah, I have a little hearing. Sean Kelly, 2804, for Dan's benefit. Just pull these close to you. There you go.
The estimate is $2.9 million based on the Nebraska Hospital Association.
An additional $2.9
on an
million
annual basis.
To Douglas County?
Correct.
That's great. And that would be used in our health center or behavioral health operations?
It really Medicaid-based.
Okay. Which floats the boat over there. I think we have something like an 80% Medicare or Medicaid contribution to our budget there. So that's a big help. Thanks. Regarding the budget, the 1413, transfers $15 million in funds for behavioral health. What's that effect on Douglas County?
So my understanding is that it'd be based on the regions across the state, 15 million in total. Commissioner Borgeson, I'm sure, could correct me if I'm wrong. So, with 6 regions, with Region 6 being the biggest, I would think probably a third of that or a fourth of that would be coming to the Region 6 area.
So an additional portion of that 15 million to our region for behavioral health services?
No, reduction.
Reduction.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So those funds were in a pot that was intended to go to Region 6 behavioral health funding, but no longer will be.
Appreciate that. The tax packages, which seem to have been kind of consolidated, I guess, in a bit of a Christmas tree bill there at the end, included a couple things that we didn't like. There was a sales tax increase and an inheritance tax decrease, which basically would have shifted tax burden from generally more wealthy people to more working type folks. And those did not pass. Is that correct?
Yeah, and just a clarification, be a documentary stamp for real estate transactions to replace inheritance tax.
Right.
But in the tax package, it was new sales taxes on that were exempted before weren't having a sales tax on them.
That would have alleviated some of the impact of this transfer, but all of that did not pass in the end because of a filibuster.
That's right, between two different bills, but yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And, you know, I want to give you guys credit for that. I know this is a complicated issue and it spanned the whole session, but I know that you were in the midst of that trying to alleviate in the case, if it did pass, its negative impact on us and the taxpayers of Douglas County, which, you know, effectively, if that whole thing goes through, could have potentially impacted our property tax.
20 seconds.
Douglas County. I'll have to come back in the second half, but I just wanted to say thank you for that. That's a big win for Douglas County, and I know it was a hard-fought battle. In the end, there was just no way to make that thing work. I mean, maybe over the interim, something could be hammered out. We'll come back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Commissioner Morgan.
Okay, first, John, thank you for all the updates you gave at night and whenever. You had quite the work schedule. And then to Sean and Julie, I'm not trying to be nice, but I think we're very, very fortunate to have you as on our behalf working for us. I mean, the job you do is just unbelievable and it's continuous. So I really respect the teachings that your dad gave and all that to do that job in such a 100 or 1,000% way. So thank you for that. The 317, will that eliminate inspections going out and walking around the property, or is it still once in 6 years?
Well, it's once in 6 years, and then it's just optional. So county assessors will have the option to do that virtual inspection if they choose.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they don't have to do it, which for the public's information, we always had to send people out. They were supposed to walk around everyone's home once every 6 years. And now they have the option if they want to go out and take a look at it. And I think in today's world, we knew that if you see somebody in your backyard, you're going to be calling the sheriff or the police to say there's someone walking around, regardless if you're wearing a necktie or how you're dressed or whatever in today's world. And you can do so much on your computer, which is what the real estate agents do in looking at the properties. So I thank you for that work, Julie and Sean, and your efforts to get that passed. I think that's a good savings for the assessor's office to have that option and do his job from the office and not have the people having to do that with the fencing and dogs and everything else. So
Agreed.
thank you
Yep.
for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Cannell, did you want a second round?
Yes.
All right.
And John, thank you again for being part of this team and helping us avoid the worst consequences that could have happened. We appreciate that. The question came up, and I think it might have been in the media yesterday or today. Sean, maybe you would address this, about Governor Pillen's intent not to call a special session unless there was a property tax package that had actual support. What's the impact of that going forward, if you could tell us?
Well, the impact, we don't know, right? Because we don't know if there is a special session, and if there is, we don't know what the call is. But presumably, there will be an impact to Douglas County if a special session is called. Whatever that proposal is, it's just a broad spectrum of if that's going to be negative, neutral, positive.
I guess what I was trying to get at was, is there a consensus in the
No.
legislature?
No.
Okay.
I mean, today, no.
Okay, and it seemed to be the governor's indication that unless there's a consensus, he's not calling a special session.
Yeah, that was and I saw the same commentary.
I do want to say that there's some opportunities here, it looks like, in the interim studies going forward for us to get our message across relative to, for instance, in Senator Clement's study examine adjustments to county revenue sources and eliminate unnecessary county expenses to compensate for a phase out of Nebraska inheritance tax. Well, it was apparent to me that squaring that circle was not possible in the limited amount of time that you had in the session.
Right.
But it gives us an opportunity again to make this message clear to everybody that if you're going to do these things, you run the risk of raising everybody's property tax. If you limit our current revenues, our only tax base really is the property tax base. We don't get sales tax and we don't have other tax sources. So, you know, I think that it's important, and I know that you guys carried this message effectively in this session, that we make it clear to constituents of all these senators that you're talking about a potential property tax increase every time you do one of these tax shifts, and don't hold us harmless from a revenue point of view. Is that right?
That is, and fortunately, several legislators share that same exact thought process.
Right, right.
Yeah, and Commissioner Kavanaugh, for my part, NACO commissioned a survey a year and a half ago, and we asked likely Nebraska voters, you know, hey, what do you think about getting rid of the inheritance tax? And surprisingly, 80% of the people said yeah. And then we said, what do you think about getting rid of the sales tax? 80% of the people said yeah. We said, what do you think about getting rid of the property tax? Same thing, right? In the abstract, let's get rid of every tax there is.
Right.
But then we went a little bit further and we said, you know, if we got rid of the inheritance tax and that meant your property taxes were going to go up, would you be in favor of it? Guess what? 80% of the people said no, don't do it. And then we further asked the question. We said, what if we got rid of the inheritance tax, your property taxes remain the same, but you had fewer services from the county? What do you think about that?
Right.
80% of the people said don't do it. And I think that's a very important
That
message to get
is
across.
important. And, you know, it goes to this interim study by Senator Day, who says, examine mechanisms to slow the rise of property tax valuations. Well, I mean, this goes hand in hand with what we're talking about. Nobody wants to raise the property tax thing. And so every time you talk about one of these other issues, you run the potential of raising property taxes.
That's time.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Kavanaugh. We'll jump to Commissioner Morgan.
Want to just mention, because it was brought up about the property taxes, Mike Boyle and I a few years ago brought this up to have it so that there could only be up to a 5% increase in the home value. That was something we talked about. Mike McDonald, State Senator Mike McDonald, introduced a bill to put it that you could only raise the taxes up to 5% the value of that home, because people get notices of 20, 40, even 50%, and we've had them right here at our board meeting in Benson talking about a 50% increase, or somewhere else in Omaha. And many states do that. If you buy a home and it's assessed at $450 and you buy it for $600, it immediately goes to the $600. After that, it can only be raised, if it's called for, up to 5% a year. And that helps people to budget. And I think that bill is still possibly pending. You probably know that that was introduced by McDonald.
Yeah, and all bills are now indefinitely postponed, but I'm sure that's a concept. There's a constitutional issue there on valuations have to be uniform, so I think that is the biggest
Correct.
challenge with that concept.
So we'll see what happens, but that would be a way to at least limit that increase. And I do want to say we have the assessor's support for that kind of measure. And I also want to say something to this board. I try to follow it fairly closely. The values are supposed to be between 92 and 100%, or 93 and 100%. Douglas County with the state, I think they met in the last few weeks, we were at the 93%, so we're at the low end, where some of the other counties surrounding us are closer to the 98%, and that's a good thing for our homeowners in Douglas County. And I'm only talking about residential property when I talk about that 5%.
Right.
So, thank you again.
Yep, thank you.
We'll jump to Commissioner Friend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And John, thanks for coming in, and Sean and Julia, thanks again for the work you're doing. We've alluded to that already. long, short session, everything ended, and my question is, and I've posed this to Sean on a couple of occasions, but my question is, are there odds, or are there good odds that the vehicle, if they call a special session, the vehicle that the governor would use would recodify not just the property, or potentially recodify not just the property tax code, but could include recodification of sales tax and income tax? I mean, is there a chance? Because the bill that died on the vine had a sales tax mechanism in it, correct?
Right, broadening the sales tax base.
So is there any indication, based on the discussions, that it's going to be a wider, there's going to be wider clarification? Here's what I mean. Let me, I've said this before, approximately 38% of the revenue generated, tax revenue generated in the state of Nebraska to operate services for government subdivisions to utilize to operate services for its citizens, 38% of it comes from property tax. 18% statewide, all 92 counties, comes from sales tax, approximately. It fluctuates up and down. It depends on who's visiting. It depends on who's doing what. So the point is, if you had a three-wheel motorcycle and you're driving down the road and you blow a tire and you put a bunny tire on one of them, it's not going to run right. It's just not going to effectively run. You're going to have to do something about it. This is a quick soapbox. If I was down there, I'm not, and they're probably thanking God that I'm not. If I was, I'd say, we're going into a special session and we're going to recodify everything. We're going to address it all because it's a three-wheel car, motorcycle, whatever. You're driving this thing down the road and you're about to crash. Now, if they do this, I'm wondering, they were going to increase the sales tax, but they weren't recodifying it. You can't just raise it. The sales tax code is broken. You think property tax is broken? The sales tax code is broken. I just alluded to it. The numbers don't add up. So what are the odds that they come in there and they say, we're not just raising sales tax, we're going to start including different services and products in this mix? I don't think the odds are very good, correct?
Well, they made an attempt at that last session.
Okay.
But I think that it would be. I mean, frankly, I think everything is on the table at this point. And the more that's on the table to get 33 votes would.
But with the one issue, and Sean, you and I have talked about this, with the one issue type of environment that a special session is going to require, could they even do it? I guess I'm asking.
I think they could. I think they could have a very broad call.
Okay, so I'll sum it up here. I've had some conversations with some senators around at least the Omaha area that I said, look, I'd like to try to communicate some, not as loud as I just did, but try to communicate some of these ideas. If they do, and the governor, I think, would be pretty open-minded to discussions like that too. I don't know if he wants to sit down with any of us, but I mean, I think we can communicate some of those issues that John was talking about earlier. A statute behind just almost everything that we do: county attorney, corrections, sheriff's office, public defender, 911, certain engineering functions. There's nothing we can do about it, and those costs are going up. So what I want to know is, do they know it? Do they understand it in a very respectful way?
10 seconds.
I'd love to have those meetings. I mean, so I'm trying to work on the back end to communicate that stuff with some of those folks.
Yeah, and I know they're willing to, and it's much easier during the interim to
That's
really
time.
get
All
the
right,
full attention.
awesome, thanks.
Thank you. We'll jump to Commissioner Cameron's third round. Ron, please know it's a 2-minute round. Yep.
I just want to wrap up by saying thanks again for your efforts this year in protecting the interests of Douglas County and ultimately the interests of the property taxpayers of Douglas County. It's really appreciated. We need to look at these interim studies going forward to help us make our case. I was alluding to one by Senator Day to examine mechanisms to slow the rise of property taxes. The 394 by Senator Holdcroft to review all programs and services acted by the legislature that impose, financial responsibility upon us. And LR 401 by Senator DeBoer, conduct a comprehensive examination of Nebraska's county jails, which we do a lot of uncompensated state work at our county jails, and that's been a back and forth, I know, for many years. But it's important that at least we're held harmless revenue-wise, and you've done a good job this year, and I know it's a struggle every year to do that. But the point that my colleague, Commissioner Friend, made about identify potential state funding sources to replace lost revenues in Senator Raybould's LR 435 is a key one, because if you move these things around, one thing affects another, and like he was talking about the three-legged cart, if you take a wheel off, well, what are you going to do with to compensate for that? My impression is you're not going to get very far just by smearing gravy around on the plate between property tax and sales tax and income tax. You're going to have to create new revenue sources, and one of them that other states have looked at successfully is legalizing recreational marijuana. I know there's been marijuana initiatives up in the legislature in the last few years. Our surrounding neighbors are passing these and realizing new revenue sources. I think Colorado's in the $500 million worth of new revenue from this. It seems that that might be, one way to go to identify potential state funding sources to replace lost revenue. I also want to thank Marcos from our staff for helping us. I know he's a great liaison, Sean, with you and Julia in Lincoln and what we do there. And thanks for NACO's standing up and assisting us in stopping some of these bad things to go forward. We've tried to make them better, and sometimes you just can't make it better. But
10 seconds.
if we don't hang together, we're all going to hang separately. So thank you, John, for being there and support and staying the course. Appreciate it.
Yeah, our pleasure. And you mentioned legalization of marijuana. I was at the Greta.
Could you speak in the mic, John?
Oh yeah, you mentioned the legalization of marijuana. I was at the Greta Van Fleet concert last night, and it's hard for me to believe that it's not legal already. But I'll leave well enough alone there.
All right, that's time. We'll move to Commissioner Borgerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to also add my thanks to all of you for the work that you did, and including our staff, all of them, because they were so instrumental in providing information to and for fiscal notes throughout the entire county and the bill. So there's a whole lot of work that goes on behind the scenes that I think people don't realize. But again, thank you all for doing what you've done. One of the things that has not been talked about that I think is absolutely essential when it comes to the current conversation about the property tax reduction legislation is that it is not sustainable. I'm going to say it again. It is not sustainable. When you go through and you sweep every department and agency's funding that has been there for earmarked for specific reasons, and you sweep it, it's gone. There is no more. So you may be okay for the next biennium, but after that, it's not going to be okay. And especially to the counties, because unless they lift some of these unfunded mandates, we will be sitting in the same predicament that we are sitting here in today. So that's just an important fact that nobody really is taking into consideration that I think needs to be taken into consideration and talked about more often.
Yeah, if I can address that, Commissioner Borgeson, just briefly. My portfolio is not to defend the governor by any stretch of the imagination, but my understanding as to why they were sweeping those agencies' cash funds is because in order, if they were going to impose a new sales tax or going to broaden the base or anything like that, it was going to take time for those receipts to start coming in, and the sweep was intended to essentially supplement it and fund property tax reductions in anticipation of those additional receipts from sales taxes.
Correct, but we get no sales tax.
No, we do
as
not.
far as counties.
Right.
So that is, I mean, I understand the reasoning behind it, but it's not going to work, in my opinion. Because we're not, as counties, unless they give us some of the sales tax, and we as Douglas County had a bill down there last year to ask them for a portion of it, and that went nowhere. So anyway, that's just a key point that I think needs to be taken into consideration and talked about more. But I do have a question as far as the special session. If they call a special session and it is specific to the property tax legislation, can they insert the inheritance tax into the fold now, even though it died in the previous session?
Yeah, my understanding is that special session call could be very broad.
Very
Now, I
broad.
was encouraged by the governor's comments yesterday that he wants 33 votes. I don't think inheritance tax repeal has 33 votes today. So I think it would be harder to put that in if they wanted to make sure they had a deal ready to go.
Okay.
Yeah, and frankly, from my perspective, you know, he needs to be trying to do addition rather than subtraction. If he does, if he says, "I'm calling everyone back for a special session because we're going to do property tax reform," and oh, by the way, I'm going to throw in an inheritance tax repeal as well, I think he loses more than he gains.
Okay, all right, well, that's what I'm worried about, but, and then lastly, some of those interim studies that we see on the list, we've done already. If you all remember, we did the unfunded mandate, we did interlocal agreements, and so, and nothing happened. But as counties, we're willing to do it again.
That's time. Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments on this topic? Go ahead, Larry. Larry?
Larry Store, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha 68132. Here's the thing. We the people don't trust our government. This is one reason. You're listening to the National Association of Counties rather than us. There's hardly one thing on this list of things they or you were in favor of or opposed or wishy-washy on. Hardly anything in there for we the people. Everything is how to take more money out of my pocket, taxpayers' pockets. If you don't get it from me, you want to get it from my relatives that might inherit whatever little bit I have left. Your job is to represent us, and we want you to reduce our taxes. Number one, spending, overspending. You can cut the fees out that you pay those people. We don't need to pay the National Association of Counties to represent us. We pay you to represent us, not them. So you're going around the will of the people. It needs to change. Just because it's an emergency, and you'll never argue with us down there to remove the emergency clause, because it allows you to do whatever you want to do, not what the Open Meetings Act says. You interpret those rules to what you think a reasonable rule is. Well, what that led to was you did away with citizen comments on non-agenda items so that we cannot speak our mind to you. We cannot ask you questions. Oh, you can talk back and forth with us if you choose to, but you seldom do because you don't like what we say and you don't want to answer our questions. We have to challenge you like we're doing right now in order to get anything out of you. I don't have enough time because you went down there, sent somebody down there to change the Open Meetings Act, take out citizen comments, put less time for citizens that do comment, and restrict them to a fine box so that I have to be right on topic with this particular item. I have no rights on any other items or citizen comment. You took those away from us. So how do you expect we the people who are getting rather upset nationally to trust you? And when you don't trust your government, what does the Articles of Confederation, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution, which you cannot separate from that, say? It is our right, our duty, to alter, change, and replace this government. and reinstitute new government. Not a revolution, but just reinstitute new people that sit in those chairs. But I'm one little guy against 7 of you, plus all your lawyers up there. I have little say in any of this. And that's what the intention of the federal government constitution is that we have the say, not you. The power's not expressed or relegated to the state, first of all. And you want to complain that the state is, the state has got unfunded mandates?
20 seconds.
Crybaby, crybaby. Well, go down and change it. Replace that government down there, why don't you? Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments on the legislative session?
Kenneth Anderson, 8443 Craig Avenue, Irvington. Brought up again, I just heard it brought up again, recreational marijuana. And I have a loved one working in the healthcare field, mental health care field, and she is alarmed by the cases of psychosis that she is now seeing more recently because of marijuana. There's something going on with this. I don't know if it's different from what it used to be, but there is a rise in the psychosis from this marijuana. They have a special name for it, cannabis something, I suppose. Or that is a bad idea to support recreational marijuana. Real bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments on the legislative session?
Luis Jimenez, 2709 Dual Avenue. Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
First of all, I'd like to talk about the unicameral. As you know, the second house is democracy. It is the commissioners talking to the people they represent. It's Larry coming here, as well as myself, is people having the opportunity to petition their government. That is the second house. And that's uniquely Nebraska, and so that we should all hold this place dear. Nebraska is a big state with a small population. We're not a city state. We have a lot of land and have to take care of a lot of infrastructure. So I think that's why property tax reigns, because that's a user tax. You have to really know the system, steady up on it, to come to determinations. And having folks like you talking to the legislators is very important. So as I've been watching this last few years, I have been appalled by Commissioner Friend saying that the legislators just don't want to talk to commissioners, as if you're not an agency of the state. There's something wrong there. There is political strategic thinking, but you should be like a prime, the commissioners, 7 of you should be prime advocates that the senators would want to speak to. And if they don't want to speak to you, I don't buy that. I think that, as has been said repeatedly, is like your lobbyist did a good job representing you because they were representing Douglas County. One thing I have a question on the lobbyist is that they are also, Kelly Plucker is also a lobbyist for the city of Omaha. Is there, moving forward, is that an issue? I talk to people often about the county and the city. So it's like, well, isn't that a conflict of interest? I don't think so. I think they have their scope of work outlined in their contracts with the city and the state. And one other thing, I've been thinking about you guys removing citizen comments from your agenda, and I'm not, I'm not mad about it anymore because now you don't have a senator showing up to speak during citizen comments to blow up your meeting. So, I guess that's a plus. Keep it open. Keep citizens coming when you have the opportunity, especially in your committees. I think you need to have more committee meetings so that you can work more closely with citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on legislative session? If not, we'll move on to our next presentation. Next, we have our presentation under item 4B, discussion/action regarding Douglas County's response to recent tornado outbreak. We have a array of different department directors and representatives from partners that were involved with the response to the tornado outbreak this weekend and the emergency that occurred, and everyone's collective response. So with that, we shall first call up Paul Johnson with Emergency Management, alongside Mike with GIS as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm Paul Johnson, Director of the Douglas County Emergency Management Agency. And as everyone knows in our community, on April 26th, on Friday night, we had an F3 tornado. In fact, we had a series of tornadoes throughout the eastern part of the state. And we had one track that was essentially visible here on the overhead, where it started in southwest part of the county near the Platte River and went in a north-northeast direction, and through that area went through Elkhorn and properties north of that, and they actually went up towards Bennington and actually continued on. We also had another tornado that affected us along the eastern side of the county that went along the Epley Airfield on the east side of Epley with the fixed base operations over there and affecting the general aviation buildings that are there. There were some 32 aircraft in those buildings, and those aircraft are damaged as well. We have so many people who have lost homes. I don't know if you've seen the area, maybe seen it on TV. It's just amazing that no one was killed in this disaster. It's mind-boggling. You see these homes, they're leveled. People's entire livelihoods are gone. We've had our phones continue to ring at the Emergency Management Agency for a myriad of reasons, but people are looking for things, and it's incredible, some of the keepsakes and valuable documents, and some of the people want pictures, and they're really in dire straits in this type of situation. This is the concern we have today. We've got weather again today. I don't know if you know that or not, but we've got weather again. We're going to shut down our volunteer activities here in midday today. We've had a tremendous amount of outpouring of volunteerism. We appreciate that. All these volunteer efforts and these nonprofits and the various government departments, these aren't things that are coordinated and put together in weeks or months. This has taken years to line this up. We are one big giant contact Rolodex in the Emergency Management Agency. I want to thank all the agencies that have helped us, all the county departments. I saw Kent Holm up here. I don't know where he is, but that guy, just tremendous. And Mike and everybody. It's just, I'm leaving people out because there's so many. And, we've been on the phone through the night, over the weekend, county engineer, public works, blah, blah, blah. You just fill in the blanks. We've had the nonprofits come to our assistance, and we deeply appreciate that as well. Yesterday, Commissioner Garcia signed our disaster declaration. Appreciate that very much. Verified by Clerk Esch. And that went down to the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency and up to FEMA. And we've had the same thing from the cities. And so we're appreciative of that. That initiates that assistance that we're trying to obtain. And so we're looking forward to that and any response we get from that. I think that, if we back up and take a look at this, as this developed on Thursday, actually it started on Wednesday. We started going our level 1 on Wednesday. We knew the weather was coming. We start to communicate the issue on Wednesday with the various departments. On Thursday, I do that call out to make sure that I got to find out. It's very important that I find out who is in town and who's out of town, and who's reachable and who's not. And so I put the directors that I needed on notice and give them a call and say, hey, on the response phase of this, are you in town or are you out of town? So that occurs. That's our level 2, where we start taking those proactive measures. Level 3 is when the incident actually occurs. It occurred Thursday night. Level 4 for us is when we seek outside assistance, and we had to do that on Saturday, of course, with all the assistance that comes in from the outside. The state has been excellent. NEMA has been constant. As you can imagine, the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency, I should clarify that. Game and Parks has opened up 2 rivers for us. We're dropping off green debris there. The status of our neighborhoods, we're making, because of the volunteers, we've had thousands of volunteers here, not hundreds, thousands, from different organized efforts, and when volunteers shows up, parking, I've seen people parking a half a mile on a county road and walking across farm fields to reach these neighborhoods to actually volunteer their services. It's dirty work, it's hard work, and they've done tremendous jobs. And various organizations, yesterday we had Samaritan's Purse here. The churches have joined us. We've got people supporting, or businesses supporting us as well throughout the community, and the Red Cross and United Way and all our partners. We just are very, very grateful. So today our concern is the high winds. We've got debris piles still sitting there, and we're working on those. We worked on late into the day yesterday, and we're going to be doing it again this morning as best we can. As it rains, that creates a muddy mess out there, as you can imagine. And you should know too, on the sirens went off multiple times on Thursday. I know I'm kind of jumping around here. I got a lot of things in my mind. But the sirens went off multiple times on Thursday, and I want to thank 911. They were tremendous for that. And we had cell phone alerts. We had the TV and media tracking that. The warning systems in this community worked fantastic. They really, I was very impressed. And when I'm out in the neighborhoods, I'm walking those neighborhoods and seeing what has to get done. And all of the people that do talk to me when they come up, they say how valuable the warning systems are. It's a multiple approach of warning systems, not one single way to notify people. It's a mixed bag of different technologies, and everyone was thankful for that. So they deeply appreciated that. Again, I can't thank all the departments enough, that we have here, and our first responders. We had that within minutes after the tornado had gone through there. Command post was set up at 204th and Maple, and working through the night, and it was a lot of late nights, a lot of phone calls, as you can imagine. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be more than happy to take them. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. I know there were long nights and a lot of energy spent to take care of the response amongst multiple agencies. So thank you for all your work. We do have 6 total speakers lined up on this one topic, so we're going to go ahead and go to our next speakers here, and then we'll take a comprehensive discussion here at the end. So next, I would like to invite Sheriff Hansen in the Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Douglas County Sheriff Aaron Hansen, and thank you, Mr. Johnson, for your team's efforts during this chaotic weekend. Some of you may know I actually just thought it would be a good idea to take my kids turkey hunting that Friday. And so I was 3 hours away in Verdigris, Nebraska, looking for a turkey. Had some storms rolling through there as well. Luckily, at the helm back home was Chief Deputy Niemock and Wren, and so they were able to hold the fort down while I traveled back to Douglas County. But in addition to them, obviously, we had all the most important people in play present in Douglas County, and that is our valuable team and all of our valuable teammates. I think the conversation that we just had reference property taxes and revenue sources was really appropriate, because as we saw starting around the noon hour on Friday, local government is the most important level of government, folks. Those are the people that are going to respond to our constituents in their time of need. Whether it's our police, our deputies, our paid fire staff, our volunteer fire staff, or our emergency managers, streets department. When I got into town, I was shocked to see how clean the disaster area streets had been. Thank God for our engineering department and our public works department moving all that debris out of the way so the first responders could get in. We had over half of our staff respond. They came on duty. If they were off duty, we knew that we had to strategically keep the other half in reserve because we didn't know how bad it was going to get. So we had 68 members of the Sheriff's Office on duty at the time. We were fortunate because it was Arbor Day. And so that meant because we did not have the courts that were actually open, and we did have the deputies assigned to the courts at the courthouse, that allowed us to make a quick shift of those deputies from the courthouse immediately out to the impacted area. That made it very, very fortuitous to us to be able to perform that search and rescue function in real time along with our partners. As we move forward, we know that there's many people in these areas that are at high risk of theft or looters or even just overly curious gawkers. And as you may have seen, I shared with you yesterday, we were very happy that the Nebraska State Patrol, the governor, thanks to a formal request from Paul Johnson, they have sent us troopers, specifically on the overnight shift, to help us supplement our stationary posts so that our deputies can be responsive to calls for service, 911 calls for service, be proactive, while also having troopers in stationary positions to be that preventative presence. And we were fortunate yesterday. We did arrest 2 thieves, one of which had multiple warrants for pretrial release violations for previous thefts. We did catch them, we suspect, in the process of stealing copper from very likely an OPPD working location. But they were in one of these areas that had been very greatly impacted by the storm. And we're going to continue to keep that effort up. And so again, I was very proud of our teamwork with all the other first responders, Paul Johnson's team, and very, very proud of our team. Very proud of my executive leadership staff as well for stepping up when we needed them to. I'll take any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Sheriff, to you and all of your team members. Much appreciated. We're going to loop back around for questions in a minute here, and we will call up Dr. Hughes and the Health Department.
Good morning, Lindsay Hughes, Director at Douglas County Health Department. So our response started before the storm had even lifted. We actually began planning for potential impacts as we knew that there was severe moving in on Friday. I actually was sheltering about 70 people in our building in the basement, and our emergency response coordinator and I were actually back in the corner making phone calls and sending emails and trying to figure out, what next steps we really needed to follow. Deputy Director Justin Frederick was on the phone. He called to find out if EOC was opening and make sure we had a plan for going there. We were on the phone with the Omaha Metro Healthcare Coalition, which represents all of our local healthcare systems. Pretty much as soon as Omaha Metro was safe, and I think the tornado was probably still on the ground up toward Blair, but we were already on the phone assessing the damage, if there was any, to our local healthcare systems. Luckily, there really wasn't any damage to our local hospitals. I do believe a number of them did lose power, especially up in that northwest corner of town, but they all had generators that kicked on right away, so there was no interruption to their operations. There was no need to transfer patients, so we really, really were very lucky there. At that point in the storm and that progress, we really didn't have too many injuries that were showing up. It was a bit early at that point to know, but all said and done, there was really just a handful of more minor injuries that were seen across our hospital systems, and all of the patients that presented from that initial storm were treated and released. So nothing serious that was presented in terms of injuries, and no deaths were reported for Douglas County for this storm. I do believe there was one in Pottawatomie County that occurred a couple days later, somebody who died from injuries. But here in Douglas County, we were able to avoid that, which was fantastic. As we proceeded on to the EOC, we were liaising with the Omaha Metro Healthcare Coalition so we could hear about any injuries that were coming in. Again, there really wasn't a whole lot. We also started getting information directly to the press right away in terms of safety and things that people would need to begin thinking about in order to keep themselves safe, and thinking about any environmental hazards there. And we also began discussing the potential need for tetanus vaccine clinic. So anytime we have a major weather event like this where there are large cleanup efforts, we know that people are going to get injured from dirty nails, from cuts and things like that, and tetanus clinics are really important to that. We had our food safety inspector went out and checked the shelter that was set up to make sure there were no environmental issues there. It was beautiful. Also went out and worked with restaurants in the damage area to make sure that they had properly stored food until their power came back on. Everything was done really well there. And we continued to stand up our own internal incident management team within the health department to plan with our own internal leadership what kinds of things we needed to do in terms of getting more information out. I think we've done 6 or 7 press releases at this point. And also, we were able to stand up that tetanus clinic, and 65 people have been vaccinated so far.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hughes, for all your work this weekend. I know there was a lot to do, but you did it well, so thank you to your department. We're going to jump to Kent Holm with Environmental Services.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kent Holm, Environmental Services Director. I wanted to just touch on a couple of different items. One, since we deal with solid waste management and are administering the contract with Waste Management for Pheasant Point Landfill, pursuant to conversations that happened mainly on Saturday, we have been providing disposal services at no charge for those folks who have storm debris coming in. And so essentially, most of Saturday, all of yesterday, and then today is what I had communicated to Ryle Palmer with Waste Management. And so those services are free to those residents through today. So one of the things that the board needs to direct me on is, do you want that to continue past today? So with that, and I can I can elaborate on that if you have specific questions. One of the things we want to make very clear, and we pushed this out through the media yesterday, is that everybody who's bringing debris to the landfill has to have those loads covered. That is to help protect human health and safety. When you're traveling down the road, if you have an unsecured load, stuff can fly off. Not only is it a littering issue, but it is more importantly a safety issue, because now you've got stuff on the road and it's causing accidents, things like that. So very important that you have loads covered, and there's going to be a surcharge assessed to folks if that's not done. Shifting gears, well, excuse me, before I shift gears on that, I did want to point out there is some information on the City of Omaha's website specific to their drop-off sites, and the one being in Greenbrier Park in Elkhorn. And just yesterday, they deployed some dumpsters out there to be able to take white goods, and those are appliances that have been damaged. White goods are specifically prohibited from being disposed of in the landfill. So that, tires, hazardous materials, and so on. That city's website, and I think you could just Google City of Omaha emergency information, it's right there. But that service got put in place by the City of Omaha yesterday. So that's an opportunity there for folks who have those damaged appliances to take part in that. Now shifting to building permits. Obviously, lots and lots of damage out here. There are going to be people who are rebuilding, repairing in some cases. Otherwise, it's a complete starting over again. One is stress the importance of having building permits. Building permits help protect human health and safety. Part of the building permit process or the follow-up inspections to make sure that building codes are upheld, that the construction, reconstruction is being done in a safe and orderly manner that is going to be safe for the residents of that particular structure. So that is critically important. One thing that came up yesterday, and I think there was a little bit of confusion out in the field, is that I believe OPD was painting, probably with spray paint, either a C on the lawn or on part of the property. That C designates that they've cleared that property. They've looked at it and they're moving on. It does not mean that the property owner can just clear and start rebuilding. We need them to have building permits in place. Now, depending on the jurisdiction, that could be Omaha or it could be Douglas County. Douglas County takes care of building permits for the unincorporated area, but also through interlocal agreement for the city of Bennington and the village of Waterloo. So this morning, earlier, Mayor Zach Johns with Bennington reached out to me and formally asked that we waive the building permit fees for building permits that would be in that jurisdiction. So I can have a resolution drawn up, if the board so wishes, for next Tuesday to address that particular Bennington situation, as well as Waterloo and the unincorporated areas. If this board directs me to, or directs us to waive the fees, I will just need that authorization because I don't have that on my own. I think that's the end of my comments. Happy to entertain any questions.
All right, thank you so much, Kent. We're going to loop back around on those two topics here momentarily, so thank you. I would like to call up Kathy Allen with Douglas County 911.
Good morning, everyone. Kathy Allen, Douglas County 911. First of all, I don't know how many people really know that we have pretty strict guidelines on when the sirens will be set off. Either it has to come from the National Weather Service, a tornado warning, Paul Johnson, or an official law enforcement or fire department personnel. So that first warning came out at 3:06. We activated the sirens right away. Then about 3:15, we got reports of tornadoes in the area of 252nd and F Street, and Waterloo Fire Chief asked us if we would continue to set the sirens off because from what he could see, these tornadoes were just bouncing and continuing. So that really helped with the the safety of our citizens. Like Paul said, the sirens being activated and people paying attention really made a big difference to Douglas County. As soon as we heard the report of the tornadoes that touched down, Omaha Fire set up a rescue team, which is a building rescue. It's like one of our major events that Omaha Fire and Omaha Police do. And that was already set up at 3:49, excuse me. And then it kind of calmed down for a bit. And then our last tornado warning was at 4:46 when they were activated, and people were like, it's all over with, it's gone. Why are we setting off the sirens? Well, that's when it touched down then at Epley also. So we had our Elkhorn Tower, which controls our radios. They lost power, but they're on generator backup, so everything was good there. I'm very proud of our staff at 911. They volunteered. We had double our staff volunteered to come in and answer phones. They did an amazing job of coordinating the city and county public safety agencies who worked extremely well together. The support 911 received from Omaha Fire Department and the rural fire departments and our law enforcement partners were very impressive. So I was thankful that everybody really worked together, and I'm kind of proud of our county people and the city people that all worked well together. And basically, that's what I have to report of the incident. Now, like so many of you had said, it's time to focus on supporting our neighbors that took the brunt of the damage. So if you have any questions, I'll be available later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And our last speaker is Tanya from OPPD.
Good morning. My name is Tanya Notel, and I serve as the emergency manager for OPPD. And I want to just echo the thoughts that have already been said. I appreciate being here, speaking on behalf of OPPD, but more importantly, the partnership we have with the communities that we serve, especially Paul Johnson and with the emergency management, the state emergency management, and our partners that have already spoken. So thank you for the opportunity. I also want to express that we are saddened of the impacts of our communities, the people that have had a destroyed house or and impacted. We've actually had a few people within internal to OPPD who were impacted, so we appreciate the efforts for them. Just a couple numbers. On Friday evening when the actual outage happened, we peaked with 10,204 customers. So keep in mind that's not homes, these are customers. They could have included large customers or small. I believe right now we're less than 100, so I think that's success in a couple of days. Going from 10,000 to 100 is a significant feat, so appreciate all the help for the communities. I want to call out specifically that we had several mutual aid communities that came in and helped us with this disaster. NPPD, our partners with Nebraska Public Power, Fremont Utilities, and our contractors, Ellie, Myers, and Watts. They helped around the clock, 24 hours a day, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, going into even Monday yesterday to make sure that we were up and running. Internally, we have specialized teams. We have 2 of them that supported this with roughly 250 folks. We have a specialized storm team. That's probably what you see as you went out into the trucks. They support our line crews out there in the field. We also have an emergency operations center similar to what Paul and the health department have. So 250 people roughly helped us mitigate and return on the lights. I just want to say 6 of our transmission lines were completely destroyed, so that's really where we're still working on is updating those with those few outages that we do have. 4 more were severely damaged, so you can imagine the work that goes into those. Those are those big overhead lines that take a little bit more time. I'm excited to say that Sunday night, a couple days ago, we reached 95% restoration. Yesterday we were at 98, and today we're at 99. So again, we have less than 100 people, customers that have been impacted. So I think that's a tremendous success. We do have some resources that I'm going to have, hopefully Dan can pass these out at the end. Please let us know if there's still people that don't have power, that are still impacted. We have a couple numbers on our phone. We have numbers on our signs, so please encourage them to call. Finally, I just want to say that we highly appreciate and value the partnerships with the state and local entities, specifically Douglas County Emergency Management. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to questions.
Thanks so much, Sonia. Appreciate it. And I've been informed that Todd Fitzer, our county engineer, is on Zoom and would like to share a few thoughts as well. So we will jump to Todd here in 1 second. Todd?
Good morning. I thought I'd go through our experience here from the engineering standpoint. I guess I'll just kind of use a timeline. I did speak with Paul Johnson Friday afternoon and confirmed that I would be available and would be able to be reached. And so, to back up what Paul said, I was on that list. We sent everybody home at about 3:15, trying to get our employees home and safe before we felt like the storm was really going to hit. We called them all back in at about 4:30, between 4:30 and 5. I went out as soon as the tornado passed and started driving county roads. We had full blockages. I've got videos available if any of you choose to see them, but full blockages. So we called everybody back in. We put plows on trucks and we started to plow trees, just push them off the road to open the roads. We helped with blocking off roads until law enforcement and barricading could arrive because of down power lines, not knowing if they were hot or not. I then made my way to the command center at approximately 5:30-ish. Didn't know what we'd be able to offer. Turns out we were somewhat helpful in getting contacts with the utility companies, which obviously we work with all the time here at the county engineer's office. So we actually got a representative from OPPD out to the command center, and we're helping law enforcement with that. We brought a pickup load of survey paint out to law enforcement so they could have paint to mark as they went house to house. And there was an FBI drone in the air that was able to read those markings and help with that effort of getting neighborhoods cleared with making sure there was no injury or loss of life that needed to be dealt with. Thankfully, we didn't go through any of that. Met yesterday. We worked all day Saturday, worked a 12-hour shift Saturday. We worked all day Sunday. By Friday night, we had at least one lane open on every road that had been blocked. By Saturday at end of shift, we had full lane operation available with the exception of where there was down power lines. We were working and continue to work closely with OPPD, trying to help out with those barricade situations, both when the road needs to be closed and when it gets opened back up, trying to get those barricades moved back and out of the way and just try to keep as many lane miles open as we possibly can. I've met with my staff yesterday morning to get a debrief on this situation, trying to find out, where we need the most help. And it looks like we're frankly in pretty good shape as far as roads being closed, ditches being opened up so that when the next storm system or rain moves through, we can get drainage. We're not experiencing additional flooding. I did fail to mention Friday night, the Public Works Director, Bob Stubbe from the City of Omaha, called and said, hey, we have available heavy equipment and things like that if you need it. We had all of ours out and it was not over capacity, so we did not utilize that, but that was one of the things we were able to offer to law enforcement. Wherever you need heavy equipment, let me know. We can have somebody there in a few minutes. I'm very, very proud of the staff here at the county engineer's office. They all, when we called them, they all were back in here within minutes and out in the trucks. Many of them, before I even got to the command center, were already out on the street in the trucks with heavy equipment, moving trees and helping folks through there. I continue, just this morning, spoke with Public Works again, just continue coordination. I won't reiterate because Kent already covered the drop sites and what's allowed there, and we have that information as well. And so I just wanted to get on here this morning, let you know we're here if you need us and what we did throughout the storm. And so very thankful for no loss of life or no serious injuries associated with the storm in this community anyway. So with that, and unless you have any questions, I will sign off.
Thank you so much, Todd, to everyone that presented today and our many partners who were not able to be here today but were heavily involved in the disaster response as well. We're going to jump to some comments from some of my colleagues. Commissioner Cavanaugh.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank all those who stepped up during this emergency. I just want to lead off with a correspondence that I got from one of my constituents. And a lot of times we hear from our constituents it's not so positive, but this one I think warrants a special mention. This came in yesterday and it says, Dear Douglas County board members, the citizens of Douglas County and Omaha owe a debt of gratitude for the excellent warnings and response time during last Friday's powerful storms. It is called a miracle that no citizens lost their lives during such terrible tornadoes. and I couldn't agree more. I want to thank our team of first responders, starting with Paul Johnson and the emergency service people, Sheriff Hansen and the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, 911 and Kathy Allen, GIS, Mike Schoenlaw, Environmental Services and Ken Holm, the engineer that we just heard from, Todd Fitzer, Douglas County Health Department, Dr. Hughes, and OPPD, and the utilities people. Tanya, thank you for this information. I think we should be gratified that this terrible storm didn't result in any loss of life in our community. But the fact that 117 homes were destroyed, and I went out and looked at some of this damage, and when I mean destroyed, it's like they're gone. There's nothing but foundation left. Does warrant our attention, and I want to say kudos to our chairman for signing the FEMA request that will get homeowners the emergency aid that they need. I think FEMA automatically steps in for the public infrastructure damage that we've suffered, but homeowners takes a special FEMA intervention. And I know from talking to Paul Johnson that that's sometimes the trick is to get direct aid to real people on the ground from FEMA. And so getting this started with a direct request to Washington and with our Washington representatives helps is going to be a big thing going forward in terms of getting people back in their homes, which are destroyed. This is a great example of our government at work responding as quickly as possible. I know that when the sirens went off, we were giving warning to people in real time, starting at, as Kathy Allen said, 3:06 p.m. on Friday. I got a call from my colleague, Mike Friend, on Saturday regarding the waiver of the dumping fee at our landfill so that people could take debris from their destroyed properties and not have to pay a fee going into the landfill. Neighbors of mine who were out on neighborhood cleanup on Saturday in our neighborhood switched and went out to Elkhorn and Bennington and did cleanup there. It was really a gratifying expression of our community's willingness to step up and help those in need in a time of trouble. And I think that everybody concerned well deserves a kudo and a pat on the back. And this is a great opportunity for us to appreciate the good things that government does in times of trouble to help people. We're not done yet, and the help that FEMA and others can provide is coming hopefully as quickly as possible. But those that I've named and others that work, the unsung heroes that you see on TV out there pitching in, deserve a big round of applause from us all. So thank you, Douglas County, for stepping up and helping in a time of trouble. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. We will jump to Commissioner Borgerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I too want to thank our departments, starting with the 911 and emergency management and roads and GIS and environmental services and everybody. I mean, here's what I think is most interesting about this is that there are so many of our departments that people have no clue on how they touch when there's a disaster. And this I think, demonstrates what we're all about in county government and what you all did responding in the health department, all of our responders. It was just absolutely tremendous. And, you know, I thought back of the 2019 floods and what we went through then. And unfortunately, some of the people who were affected at the floods were the same people that were affected by this tornado, and that is absolutely heartbreaking. But one thing that I do see in folks is their resiliency, and it is absolutely amazing to me. But I do want to, again, particularly thank all of those who, from the county, who again are kind of in the backgrounds. Nobody even knows what some of the stuff that you did and do for us, and it is absolutely amazing. And so I thank you for that. I do want to shout out in my district, Waterloo was hit, and Fire Chief Travis Harlow and Police Chief Tim Donahue were pretty amazing, and we're right there, Johnny, on the spots, and got command center set, got coordination happening. And again, I think some of it was just unfortunately because we've had other disasters in that area where they knew exactly what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And they too deserve amazing kudos. And then thank you just to the volunteers. And I actually received calls from jurisdictions in Sarpy County telling us that they had, whether it be public works or additional equipment, things in need, they would be there for us. And so we just needed to reach out. And that says a lot, again, to just how in a disaster, in times of need, we all seem to be able to come together, and that's pretty amazing. I do have a couple questions. I don't know if this is the time to ask those, but I may run out of time. But just so you all know, the two questions, whenever you come up to answer, were any of our towers damaged? I know there were two that you reported when the sirens first went off that we had issues with, but from the storm, were there any additional towers that were damaged? And then maybe you answer this one too, Paul, the building permits and the landfill cost, are we as a county able to put those costs into our FEMA reimbursement asks from the federal government? So whenever the chair has people come up, those were
Got
the
about
two
30 seconds,
questions.
Paul, if you want to answer the FEMA question quick. Yeah.
The FEMA question is a good one. That's not the only one. We've had a lot of those types of questions pop up, and we will submit those. It's whether or not they'll get approved, but we will submit them. And, you know, when it comes to FEMA approval, I do my best.
Thank you, Paul. And we'll loop back around to the other question that Commissioner Borgeson had in a second round. Commissioner Friend, do you have your light on?
Yeah, I don't think I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a question, and but I wanted to say, I don't know what time it was, and I have a deck that faces the south. I live in Bennington, and I have a deck that faces the south, and I'm looking west. And we had gone over and got my mother-in-law and father-in-law, 80-some years old, and they live about a mile north of us. And Jackie rushed up to get them, and she came over. And like an idiot, I'm standing on the deck looking west, and I'm 62 years old, and I've never seen anything like it. I have never seen anything like what I was looking at. And then maybe I wasn't an idiot anymore. I go, I don't like that, and I went downstairs into the dugout. That being said, I knew there's a lot of things I didn't know. I'm staring at something I'd never seen before, but I knew this is horrible. People are going to die. So my question is, from a coordination standpoint, and I don't know if it's for Paul or it's for the sheriff's office or it's for 911. At what point, because it's all a blur now, at what point did we realize that human beings were all accounted for? How did we know there was no loss of life? Was it late Friday night? How do we account for that stuff? Because there 117 homes destroyed. Is the police and sheriff going through all the homes trying to and 911's getting calls? How does that coordinate?
That's exactly what happens. You know, the first responders get into the neighborhoods, and fire goes and does their search and rescue operations. And, you know, it presented a challenge, I'll be honest with you, because some of those people just weren't home. And you don't know if they're buried in the rubble or where they're at. So it's not an immediate notification or realization. It takes a long time to get through that.
Okay, because, so here's my final thing, and it's an offshoot of the first question. That night, later on, news reports and people going, well, to the best of our knowledge now, nobody's been seriously injured or no deaths. Did we not know until, I mean, were we pretty comfortable by Saturday morning at, noon, or Saturday morning at 11 o'clock that everybody's, I mean, are there timelines, or are we just waiting for the calls? I mean,
I don't. Paul Johnson, Douglas County Emergency
when were you
Management
comfortable that nobody had?
Yeah, when we it really helps once the daylight hours occur. So once the daylight hours occur, then we're able to get through there, and homeowners are notified and that type of thing. So we get people that are accounted for that way, and neighbors verifying for neighbors.
And the reason I asked the question, it seems like I'm being nosy. I'm not. I was at 7:30 in the morning. I was out at Relevant, and there were 3,000 people out there. And I'm thinking, if we go out to certain places and what if we, what are we going to find? I mean, and then I had to go up to Bennington. And by the way, Mayor Zach Johns and the Bennington, there were almost as many people up in Bennington. I mean, the outreach and what people want to do after something like that happens has been pretty heartening. So all I can tell you is the first thing that occurred to me was I'm in a house and I find, unfortunately, somebody seriously injured or passed away in that house. And I'm like, I'm not qualified to do anything about this. It scared me a little bit.
Yeah,
So-
our fire department, that's their job. And, they work tirelessly through that. Had a pretty big team doing that.
I know, it's kind of a stupid question that I asked,
No,
but I
it's
mean,
not.
it was the first thing that occurred to me, so.
Well, and NEMA wants to know that too, so we have to send that in a Lifelines report right
Okay,
away, so.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Borgerson, did you want to loop around to your second question?
Just if you want, I was just curious about whether or not there were any siren towers that were damaged. That
Yes.
question came to me and I wasn't sure.
Yes. We know we have at least two.
Okay. But those were before, or are these in addition to the two?
In addition to the two.
In addition to the, okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Just following up, Paul, I got this, and I think a lot of people did. It might have been Friday morning, Friday midday anyhow. And this is part of why we were able to do what Commissioner Friend was talking about. I've heard from numerous people about events that were scheduled that were canceled in anticipation of this. But this went out from your office, I think Friday morning, Friday midday. With the potential for severe weather expected for Douglas County this Friday afternoon, April 26, 2024, the Douglas County Emergency Management Agency would like to stress the critical importance of residents being proactive about receiving weather alerts. We urge residents in Douglas County to monitor weather forecasts and alerts closely. 2 outdoor warning sirens in the Douglas County area currently undergoing maintenance will not sound in the event of severe weather. Read more details below for those sirens are located. But these types of proactive, before the event, warnings to people, I think helped us get to the point where we didn't suffer a loss of lives. And even my colleague, Mr. Friend, went to the basement as he was supposed to. And I think, your department doing these types of things is a real credit to the services that we provide to the residents of Douglas County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll take a few seconds just to express my gratitude to both all the departments at all levels of government, county, city, state, with the state troopers that were helping out the sheriff's department, and all levels of government coming together to collectively respond in as efficient manner as possible as you're trying to make decisions on the spots of what to do next in all your various capacities. So it was pretty amazing to see us come together like that. And it's kind of odd because
on one hand, you have these tragedies that happen in our society, but on the other hand, it brings out the best in us as a citizenry, as a country, and in these moments of tragedy, we all bleed American, right? We all come together to help each other out, both us in official capacities, but also as citizens coming out to volunteer, to donate. You know, there are so many nonprofits, churches, and just individual citizens that wanted to come out and support, to the extent that some of the agencies had to say, oh, we're good right now, you know, we're at capacity with volunteers and supplies. You know, that was how much support the citizens wanted to provide during the weekend. So that was amazing to see. And the last piece I'll say here is that, you know, there is an actual art, a science, and a profession to emergency preparedness, right? Sometimes some people may wonder, like, oh, why do we spend so much money on full-timers that, you know, do just emergency preparedness, you know, if we only have emergencies every so often. But, you know, this is the one exact example out of many examples that could be cited of why we need emergency preparedness across our many departments in the different capacities, from, you know, the public health capacity to the law enforcement capacity to just central coordinators of, you know, emergency responsiveness in general. It's all important, it's all needed, and it's something that we have to keep funded in a healthy way, because, you know, these disasters will only keep happening, right, with global warming and who knows what else. You know, these disasters, unfortunately, are just a reality of living on this earth. And so I just wanted to plug the art, science, and profession of emergency preparedness and how important it is across our many departments. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, all the other agencies that were present today that spoke. If there's any, Commissioner Borgeson, and then we'll take some public comments if there are any. Commissioner Borgeson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted, as I was sitting here reflecting on what everybody said, I do want to shout out to our county engineer, because I had no clue of the work that they did from the get-go. I knew they were called in, but for him to describe what they actually did was pretty amazing. And so again, for citizenry and for us as a board, knowing what takes place and what we do as county is pretty extraordinary. So I just want to thank Todd and again for giving us that rundown of what his department did. So thank you.
You know, if I could mention to interrupt here, that Leah Baez, she did an amazing job in the public information piece. I mean, I've been on Fox News, the Weather Channel, Good Morning America, CBS. It's just been nonstop, and Leah's been managing all of that, and she's done just a tremendous job. And so I deeply appreciate that. And you know, thank you for recognizing the county engineer, and you know, DOTComm, they're working behind the scenes and they're making things happen too. And you know, if people are really interested what's happening in Douglas County or what's happened, if you go to our website, readydouglascounty.com, on the left-hand side, there's a little red tab that says local history. You can see all the disasters and community emergency and natural disasters that have occurred in Douglas County since the 1800s, and all the recent ones. There's been many that have happened here.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Yep. And before I forget, we did have a pending question with Kent, with the debris. We, as a board, were in favor of waiving the fee up through this point and to the
Today.
board meeting, so we can discuss it further. I think that on the administrative side, there's a recommendation to extend that to Friday. Do you want to speak to that?
I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have. Yes, if that's the directive of the board, then I will communicate that to Waste Management.
And there is a daily cost of approximately $17,000 or so to that.
I think at this point, that's a figure you can kind of shoot at. It'll depend, you know, if we still see the volume like we saw yesterday. Around 580 tons of material coming in, like 315 individual loads of material. So it's averaging about 2 tons per load. So that's kind of where we are right now. Hopefully, you know, that goes down, but we'll see as the week goes on then.
Thank you. And clearly, as a board, we don't want to charge anybody who's been through a disaster, even though it is a cost to the county. It's a way that we can help as well. So is there a will from the board on this? Motion to approve the extension through Friday. Yep. Second by Friend.
Give me 1 moment, please.
Comment by Commissioner Borgeson.
Just wanted, as we do this, could we maybe get an update on where we are on Friday on this in case we have to come back and do something next Tuesday, but just keep us updated on how things are working?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I guess the one clarification I would ask today is that the landfill is open on Saturday. Obviously, people not working, there may be some additional activity on Saturday. So
Then I would
you want to
change
give
it
me
to
some direction on how you want
till
Saturday?
I'll
Through
change my
Saturday?
motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Second,
Okay.
okay.
To include Saturday.
And there won't be extended hour, sorry, may I?
Are you okay, as the secondary, are you okay with that amendment to the
I
motion?
am.
Okay.
Yes, but I had a quick question
Go
for
ahead.
Ken, is that all
Yeah,
right?
go ahead.
Kent, so we're not going to, we don't have to, but we're not going to discuss extended hours or potentially Sunday because we're talking about human resources issues, probably, I would guess, and then also liability issues. The reason I asked that is somebody said, well, why can't we just leave it open and we can put volunteers in there? Well, there's huge liability issues with that. So I didn't want to speak for you, but I was telling them no. Sunday's off the agenda, right?
Yes, correct. Sunday, the landfill is closed. I would note, though, on the extended hours, Waste Management will have the scale house open until 6 p.m. through Saturday.
Okay.
So that is available with some extra hours.
So, yeah, I'm okay through
All
Sunday.
right, so there's a motion on the table to waive the fee at the waste yard through Saturday. And there's been a second, so any further discussion? Otherwise, we'll vote. Please vote.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and then Kent.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Yes.
I just want to clarify that is for, because of the motion that was made to waive the fee through Saturday, that is for storm-related damage only.
Yep.
This is not for
Correct.
anything that's brought into the landfill.
Yep, storm related, yep. Thank you. And then, Kent, I'll go ahead and just request that you bring forth that resolution you mentioned to waive building permits for anybody that is storm affected in the area. And we can consider that as a board at the next board meeting next Tuesday.
Okay, will do.
Thank you. All right, that concludes this conversation. We do have a public hearing to get to on item 6A. Oh, yep.
Mention one thing. I know OPPD's here and want to thank you also for what you've done. Appreciate you sitting through the meeting.
Thank you. We'll jump to public hearing. Item 5A is a public hearing for Class C 126375 license for Reyes Ranch Entertainment LLC, DBA Reyes Ranch Entertainment at 14009 Calhoun Road, Omaha, Nebraska 68152, and manager application for Daniel M. Dring, 7616 North 156th Avenue, Bennington, Nebraska 68007. I will open the public hearing for commentary on this item. Please note that I think the current plan is to hold over the public hearing up through May 21st before taking official action per the request of the applicant. Is that correct? Okay. So with that being said, we'll take commentary.
Good morning, Chairman Garcia and honorable members of the board. My name is Danielle Dring, and I am here to respectfully request that we can hold this item over until May 21st. We are working with members of the Liquor Control Commission as well as the State Patrol, we have been in contact with Jeremy, with the Health Department, and I have called and left a couple of voicemails for the Fire Department as well. I understand that all 4 of these processes occur simultaneously, and we don't have resolution on all of the open items, so I wanted to make sure that the reason for our request has been very candidly communicated with you. We are working on, I think, like, there's a requirement for a brick and mortar restroom and some hand washing sinks and a couple of other open items with respect to requests that the health department has made for us. And then the state patrol officer, the state patrol investigator came out and mentioned that he would like to see one other area of fencing, even though the rest of the fencing is already in place. So there's a couple of other fencing items that are being worked on as well. So if we are under the impression that we're not going to be able to make that May 21st timeline work, we should know within the next, I think, 3 days. So by the end of the week, I will probably have an answer or an indication as to whether or not I will be able to accommodate all of the requests by May 21st. If I'm in a position where that's not going to be something that I can accomplish, I will withdraw the application. So at this time, I want to make sure that that's very clearly communicated with all of you, and I very much respect your time, and thank you for listening to me this morning.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Any comments on this item? Commissioner Bergeson?
So we would just basically leave this open until the 21st, right? Because you've opened the public hearing, so we
That's-
just
yeah.
leave it open till the 21st?
That's my
and-
understanding.
Okay.
Yep.
Unless we hear otherwise, right?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
Anything else on this item? Otherwise, we're going to leave the public hearing open and hold it over to May 21st.
Thank
Yep.
you. I
Thank you.
appreciate that. You guys have a wonderful day.
All right, thank you. We'll jump to our committees. 6A, Finance Budget Report as presented, and also the monthly fee report as presented as well. On top of that, we do have an item under Admin Services. It is a discussion item. Well, it also says approval for Field Club renovations and additions to Clubhouse. We do have our friend from the Field Clubhouse here. I'm not sure if you were going to speak or if Jeff was going to speak. Who's speaking on this? Jerry's supposed to be here? Hmm? One second.
Sorry, I was
as-
talking to the
oh,
sheriff's office. What
go ahead,
item is
Patrick.
it? I was talking to the sheriff's office, so I didn't hear. What's the item?
This is the Field Club renovations item.
Yeah, there should be somebody on from public property, I would think, unless you can speak to it.
Ken Holm, Environmental Services Director. I can speak to at least one point of this. This renovation project is going through under public properties, but I'm going to be asked to sign off on a stormwater management piece of it. This is similar to what I did for a previous renovation project there. So I'm willing to do that, assuming favorable consideration here by the board. I'll go down to the clerk's office, and Ellen has that document that I'll sign off on there. So that's the piece that I'm familiar with that's stormwater related in our permit.
Okay. Anybody else on this item? I think I will. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
If you're making a motion, I'll second it. I just wanted to interject. I've read these documents, and they appear to be an amendment to our lease with Field Club to allow for their compliance with stormwater regulations of the city of Omaha. And that would hold us harmless. And so if you're making the motion, I would second that.
All right. Motion by Commissioner Borgeson to authorize the signing of the document for the wastewater additions at Field Club. Second by Commissioner Kavanaugh. Any other comments on this item? If not, we'll vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. We'll move on in our agenda. The other item was Human Resources, the weekly personnel report as presented.
Is my understanding that we do not have a need for executive session. Is that still the case? I think so. Yep, very good. In that case, I can take a motion for adjournment.
Second.
Motion by Rogers, second by Morgan. Please vote.
Motion passes 7-0. We are adjourned at 11:09 a.m.
Thank you.